everyone. We have this evening John Bird, who will formally cut the red tape for the festival. Mr. John Bird.
Thank you. I read Down and Out in Paris and London, actually, while I was on the run from the police. I was sleeping rough in London, and actually I stole the book from a very nice bookshop, very much like this, a lot smaller, called John Sandoe's bookshop, which is off the King's Road, Chelsea, and which is still there. They didn't like the fact a few years ago when I said, you know, I used to come in the shop and shoplift. And I wanted to tell them what a wonderful reincarnation I'd had and how I'd been a part of the problem and I was now a part of the solution. And I was now a posh geezer who bought books. But they didn't want to know that. They just knew, you know, once a shoplifter, always a shoplifter, bugger off. But I was reading Down and Out in Paris and London, and I'd only really just learned to read and write, because even though I went to school like most people, I went to one of those secondary modern schools run by Catholics who taught you everything you need to know about Jesus Christ, so his shoe sizes and his favourite shampoo, but very little about life and about politics and about the social oppression that goes on in the process of when you run a market society. So none of that stuff. I was born in Notting Hill to a London Irish family where we were taught to hate everybody, blacks, Jews, Indians and English people. And as I keep saying, I haven't quite made my mind up about the English. So I was brought up in a place that George Orwell at one stage lived. He lived in Portobello Road. And I was always obsessed by Orwell because I was reading this book about the smell of poverty. Even though I was born in this after the Second World War, that smell of poverty, living in a house where we shared, in slummy Notting Hill, where we shared a toilet with 8 or 10 other families, where you had a bar of soap and you used that bar of soap to clean yourself with, to wash the floor and even to wash your clothes. As well as being made homeless at 5, I then moved on to a Catholic orphanage, and then after that we moved to a block of council flats in Fulham, and then I started shoplifting and housebreaking and stealing all sorts of stuff and was a runaway and slept rough. And then from the age of 15 onwards, I kind of tried to make my way in the world that Orwell knew very well, which was amongst the rough sleepers, amongst the people who hid. And on occasions, I would stay in a really dirty old working men's hostel. There was the Round Houses and there was the Salvation Army. I avoided the Salvation Army because as a devout Catholic, as well as a devout shoplifter, I didn't want to go in with all those prods. But that was the kind of world that resonated. Here I was reading a book about a London that I knew. I even knew the places. I knew the Trafalgar Square, I knew Clerkenwell, I knew the hostels that he talked about. And this was 30 years after the event. In 1967, also trying to avoid the police, I went off to France. And I went off as a little Briton, you know, one of those racist geezer who went over there to tell the frogs how if it weren't for us, they'd still be under the Nazis or something like that. You know, I was a real internationalist. And I arrived in Paris, and there were all these incredibly gorgeous, haute bourgeois Trotskyists. The most beautiful women you met in wonderful stockings and regalia and all that kind of stuff. And it was unbelievable, but the best looking women were on the left. So I decided to become left-wing. And that is very true. At the 20th anniversary of the May and June days, I got in a fight with one of these French, resistance philosophers who said, "Are you trying to tell me that you only got involved in the struggle for international Marxism because you wanted to lay women?" And I said, yes. But anyway, I went off there, I met these people, and I became a Marxist-Leninist. But not only a Marxist, Leninist, Engelsist, I also became a Trotskyist. And then I came back and I joined what became the Workers' Revolutionary Party. And one of the books that we were kicking around was Homage to Catalonia. And wow, again, the earlier Orwell about my own life as a street person living in dirt and poverty. And then there was this other Orwell it was an absolutely blistering appraisal of how later we came to realize, and I'm not just saying the Trotskyists, but later we came to realize that because of the Stalinization of communism, they distorted it and they turned it into something other than what it was really supposed to be, which was a movement to create a classless society, and it wasn't going anywhere near creating a classless society. And Orwell told us all about that. He told us all about it after the war, and he told us all about that before the war. And that is one of the most magnificent things, that a man who could write with such majesty, such simplicity, such beauty, could also be telling us some of the big issues, the big stories of the 20th century. We read that book time and time again. Our party never agreed with Orwell. I think it was largely because he did go to Eton, and nearly everybody in the Workers' Revolutionary Party went to Harrow. And you know, never the twain shall meet. And of course, we must never forget the work that he did on liberating our understanding of what was bestial about the British Empire and what happened when he was in Burma, when he was a military policeman. He entered the spirit of watching some native being hung in one of his stories. And you can see, I mean, he's got an absolute contempt, which goes with the job. And I don't think, I'm sorry, I think these people who run the country and own the world are absolute scumbags, but I don't think they're any different from the ones who hid it before. I think the real problem that we've got today is we do not have a proper form of government which means that we deliver to poor people proper education and proper social direction. What has happened in the post-war period is that we've had a new kind of poverty created. Why is it? In order to avoid going back to the days of the hungry 30s, we then created something called the welfare state, which we then allowed Margaret Thatcher to totally and utterly destroy in its old form, where it was a contributory system, and turn it into a non-contributory system. So that what we actually have is that from 1987, 88 onwards, when Margaret Thatcher closed down all of the leading industries, the steel industry, the heavy engineering industry, the shipbuilding industry, and the coal industry, what she called lame ducks. And what she did was she closed all those down, and when she was asked by Lord Willie Whitelaw, what are you going to do with nearly 1 million workers? And she said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to give them benefit. And a coach and horses was sent through that wonderful beverage invention, which was about giving people support when they needed it, and when they didn't need it, you took the support away from them. And she parked up, warehoused the generations that now, whose children have been rioting in our streets. And we now have a system of a nationalization of poverty, unlike what we had in Orwell's day. We did not want to go back to Orwell's days. We did not want to go back to the hungry 30s. So what we did was we built this system, which has turned a working class, a remnant of the working class, into a workless class. And what we've done is we've totally and utterly destroyed them. And benefit has become an ugly word, whereas in fact, it should be a word that means benefiting people to get out of poverty. I don't want to go on too long because we haven't got much time, but I am absolutely convinced that we need to go back to George Orwell. We need to look at him. We need to measure the things that he never knew were going to happen. I think one of the big elements that is missing is the element of self-help. When Orwell got off his derriere and left the military police and came back here, he did his own thing. He took leadership in his own life. He said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go and look around, and I'm going to pierce through the appearance of Britain, this ailing empire nation. And that's what he did. And that is the spirit that we need to give every one of our children. We need to give them the spirit of self-help, of taking a lead in their lives. And unfortunately, especially in the area I work in, homelessness, there's a provision for everything other than for opportunity. So 20 years ago when I started The Big Issue, I started The Big Issue because there were 501 homeless organisations in London alone, and not one of them gave the opportunity that they could earn their own money. Back to Orwell. Orwell is a saint in a truest sense of the word. Orwell has something for everybody. He has something for those people who want to make their way in the world, who want to clean up their English, who want to learn how to write the best English you can imagine, but at the same time has a profound commitment to social justice and to social opportunity. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.